Laos is a place of great beauty with a brutal past. The people here have fought for survival and used their land for protection. The vast caves provided shelter from a bombing campaign which decimated the country. But now there's a new enemy: rapid deforestation. More and more farmers are clearing the land, and big industry is destroying forests at an alarming rate. As climate change continues, this degradation has a global impact. Laos is at the tipping point of change, but can this developing country balance the needs of the people with the needs of the planet? I'm in Southeast Asia, in the small landlocked country of Laos. I've landed in the capital of Vientiane. Laos is one of the last remaining communist countries in the world. Here, the pace of life is slower. The people are poor, but rich in tradition and history.
Every morning, the local monks walk down the street to the temple, and people give them food, and that's their sustenance for the day.
Its geography is breathtaking. Limestone formations, called karsts, are surrounded by lush forest and a land rich in resources like timber and minerals. But increasingly, this small country is under big pressure. Its climate is changing. The dry seasons are getting longer, and its disappearing forest is causing global concern. I'm on a journey to find the source of these problems. I'm starting in central Laos, in the Shanghai province, to learn about an old and controversial farming practice.
The smell of smoke is thick in the air. It looks like it's foggy, but it's actually smoke up in the mountains.
The ground is on fire as farmers burn their land, clearing it to plant new crops. It's called slash and burn and happens for 4 months every year during the dry season.
On the hillside behind me is a really good example of a typical slash and burn for here in Laos. What the farmer has done is cut down the old vegetation, let it sit and dry out for a while, and then set it on fire to get it ready for the next crop.
Farmers are poor, and the terrain is steep and difficult. Slash and burn is the most practical technique they have to fertilize the soil and grow their crops.
Wow! Got a significant burn operation going on here.
It's an agricultural practice dating back thousands of years. It's not pretty, but it is effective. During the burn, carbon enters the atmosphere as CO2. But after, a mineral-rich residue of potassium, phosphorus, silica, and other minerals are left, providing nutrients for the rice crop. Dr. Terry Bolger is a scientific advisor to the Lao government. He's been studying the practice firsthand. He tells me what happens next.
Then you have the ash on the ground, and you've opened up the ground surface. So in a few weeks' time, when the rain comes, then they'll plant into this with their crop, most likely upland rice.
Very low tech.
Yep.
The farmer will just go around with what they call a dibbling stick. So it's just a stick that's maybe a bit pointed on the end, and they'll poke holes at about 25 centimeter intervals, and then in each hole they just drop a few rice seeds.
In the next stage, the monsoon rains will fall and help all those nutrients sink into the soil. Farmers rely on the rains to nourish crops, but the dry seasons are lasting longer, so the harvest could be drastically reduced, and that affects entire villages.
These bigger burns, it's actually going to be the fields of multiple families from one village.
And how much space would they clear typically?
Let's say they might only burn 1/10 of their farming land each year and then rotate around. Now, when population density or pressure on the land starts to get higher, then the system ecologically doesn't work so well anymore.
As more poor Laotians turn to agriculture for survival, the amount of available farmland gets smaller. For the farmers who can't afford sophisticated farm equipment and fertilizers, the merits of this technique are obvious.
Slash and burn agriculture is normal for this part of the world, and no single farmer is going to put that much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. However, no raindrop believes that it's responsible for the flood, so if you add up a lot of these together, thousands upon thousands, the impact does become significant.
But this is not just a farming practice confined to Laos. Worldwide, an estimated 250 to 300 million farmers use slash and burn. It's illegal in Laos because the government worries that too much of the land is being degraded.
You get more erosion, you get more problems with weeds, and you get declines in soil fertility. So those are the main three things that end up making the system sustainable.
As we travel throughout the region, fires are everywhere. The air quality is poor, and some fires are out of control.
Oh, wow. Looks like this slash and burn got a little bit more burn than they were expecting. Coming up the hill, the one thing you don't want to be is uphill of a fire. The wind has really picked up, so that's going to fan the flames.
This fire is getting too close to the nearby village.
A little close for comfort right now.
And there are very few resources to fight the blaze.
Right now, all these little kids are scrambling down the hill with this fire hose because they're fast and they can get through the bush really, really quickly and get that hose to the fire. That sound.
The winds shift, and eventually the fire burns out. The fires set by farmers can destroy swaths of forest, but are by no means the biggest threat to the land here.
You know, now there's other projects like mining projects or hydropower projects or large plantation tree projects that are all competing for the traditional lands that were used by the local villagers for slash and burn.
All of these factors have contributed to the forest cover in Laos declining from 70% to 41% of the land in 40 years. One of the worst culprits is logging, much of it illegal. The demand for wood in neighboring Vietnam and China has contributed to a logging boom. Many old forests have also been cleared for large and profitable rubber tree plantations. The government has now restricted how much land gets cleared, but observers say the rules are not strict enough and are being ignored. It's a problem all over Southeast Asia, which has the fastest rate of forest decline in the world. As trees are cut down, 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year get released into the atmosphere due to deforestation. Forest carbon is released when trees burn or when they decay after dying. But trees are also necessary for our planet's survival. Through photosynthesis, trees absorb harmful carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They then use sunlight to turn the CO2 into oxygen, which is put back into the air, helping animals and plants breathe. And now, the devastating effects of deforestation are having a massive impact on the wildlife of Laos. Not long ago, the forests of Laos were home to large populations of both wild and domesticated elephants. But today, they're on the brink of extinction. Wide-scale logging in Southeast Asia is a serious threat to the global ecosystem. I've come to an elephant conservation center in a remote part of northern Laos to see the impact deforestation has had on the elephant population.
It's early morning. The elephants have been left out in the forest overnight so they can rest up and graze. And now, the mahouts are going to go and find them and bring them back to the conservation center.
Once, Laos was called the land of a million elephants. But a dramatic loss of almost 85% of their traditional habitat means that the population in Laos has declined from 2,000 or 3,000 in the late 80s to around 800.
They really are majestic animals in every sense of that word. They move with such purpose, almost in slow motion, and they have just so much mass, but yet at the same time, so much grace.
Elephants are paying a steep price for illegal logging in this country. Dr. Annabelle Perez is a biologist here, and she helps rehabilitate elephants.
Half of the population, or more than half of the population, is still working logging in Laos.
Most of the elephants here have been rescued from the logging industry. Their riders, called mahouts, rely on the income to survive. They work the elephants to the point of exhaustion and injury. Some are even drugged so that they'll work faster. These conditions have resulted in the elephants not breeding. Their numbers have plummeted.
For years and years, we treat them like they are slaves, you know? So, and I think now is the point to change this. It's time now to admire them again and respect them.
The center is encouraging mahouts to give up logging and use their elephants differently. They're part of an eco-tourism retraining program where they're learning new ways of handling the elephants.
Not all the mahouts are bad mahouts, you know?
Right.
They understand why it's better to give food instead to hit them.
Touch, voice signals, and food prompts are used while working with the elephants. They want to preserve the tradition of mahouts, but put it to good use in a modernizing world.
Okay.
There we go.
Here we go.
Okay, now you say side.
Side.
All right.
Side.
Okay.
Side.
And then shake your leg now. Use your voice.
Trying to remember all the commands. Side. Quiet. Quiet.
The center also runs a full veterinary practice and a special nursery for newborn elephants.
It's pretty amazing watching Mama and the baby. So cute.
Set in 250 acres, it's a safe haven away from logging, where the babies and mothers can thrive.
This area is specifically for the elephants to interact and socialize on their own, without the mahouts, without people around, just doing their thing. Do you think the future is bright for the elephants of Laos?
It depends. They can, now is the point, like, or we can make the difference and go here, or we can keep destroying the forest and go down.
Elephants are not the only ones who've struggled for survival. Not long ago, Laotians themselves had to reshape the environment to save their lives. Laos's relationship with its environment has always been one of adaptation. Working with nature to survive in difficult circumstances is nothing new for Laotians.
It's impossible to come to Laos and not talk about UXO, which stands for Unexploded Ordnance. Bombs. Lots of bombs.
Just 40 years ago, millions of bombs were raining down on Laos during the U.S. secret war here. You can see remnants of them everywhere.
During the Vietnam War period, the Americans dropped more bombs per capita here in Laos than any other country has been bombed in the world.
To survive, the villagers and opposition communists sought refuge in the vast caves in the hills. Terry and I are going into the Vien Sai caves.
That is one serious door.
This cave was a hospital.
Look at a stack of hospital beds.
Yeah. Incubator.
It was built in the late 1960s at the height of the bombing.
This part of this cave was mainly used as an operating room for treating people and a maternity ward. What an interesting place to have a baby. Yikes. Being bombed in a cave.
There were more than 400 caves in this area. Elaborate warrens of tunnels connected eating and sleeping quarters, schools, workplaces, military barracks, and government offices.
Up to 20,000 people were living in these caves. They could hide in here for years. It just goes on and on, doesn't it? They knew that they were in for the long haul. They've reinforced the ceilings, expanded some of the passageways.
Oh, wow, this must be the theater.
They survived 9 years of constant bombing. It's estimated that 20,000 lives were saved by these caves, and that they helped secure victory. The U.S. stopped its bombing campaign in 1973. Today, Laos's caves are helping the world understand a major threat to the planet: climate change. Scientists have figured out how to read the messages that these caves are offering up. Terry and I head to the next cave.
Now there's a lot of limestone
here in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, this area in central Laos that carries into central Vietnam a little bit is one of the largest blocks of limestone in Southeast Asia.
Laos also has a vast system of rivers. All that water pounding on limestone for millions of years has carved out underground waterways that contain some scientific treasures. We're heading to the Konglor Cave to do some exploring.
One thing I've learned about the caves here in Laos is that they're big, really, really big. You could practically fly an airplane through them.
Terry is conducting some important climate research, and these caves are a crucial part of that work.
What we have in this part of the world is what's called a monsoonal type climate with a distinct wet season and dry season. In terms of understanding climate change, we want to look back, say, thousands, maybe 20,000 years ago to understand what the changes of the monsoon have been through that time period.
Knowing how seasons fluctuated in the past can help Laotians understand how long they should expect wet and dry periods to last in the future. Terry and other scientists do this climate research by looking at cave mineral samples found deep inside. We're traveling through the mountain via an underground river that's 4 miles long.
So what's the name of this river?
Hinbun, Limestone River.
That's appropriate, considering we're under millions of tons of it right now.
It's pitch black in here. Our flashlights have to work hard in this massive space.
Basically going upstream right now.
We're looking for stalagmites of just the right age to help with Terry's research. Millions of years worth of water dripping from above during wet periods and then evaporating when it's dry have left behind telltale marks on these structures that are a virtual record of Laos's climate through the ages.
Real shallow spot. And there's a waterfall here.
We hit rapids. These caves are dangerous and unpredictable. This scientific expedition is becoming a white-knuckle adventure. We're navigating some unexpected rapids deep inside the belly of a mountain. But it isn't long before we're through.
Little elbow grease gets you through anything.
We continue through the darkness. We're looking for the best stalagmite for Terry's research.
Let's go have a look.
We need to find a stalagmite that Terry can tag and monitor over the next few months. He wants to find an active one and then see how much water drips on it in the upcoming wet season.
Oh, it's beautiful on this side, Terry.
All right, get an estimate of how tall this column of formations is.
So let's see, to that flowstone over there.
In the future, the
4.2
chosen
meters.
stalagmite will be removed and put under the microscope for deeper analysis. Scientists can read its cross-section like a history book.
Get a distance to the wall.
Stalagmites are particularly useful for climate research because they contain several different climate records, such as oxygen and carbon isotopes.
Okay. Looks like there might be some standalone stalagmites over this way.
Watch your step. Look at this big mama.
Too big for what we want today.
What about Junior here? A little more manageable size?
I think this would work for us. You know, probably we're looking at somewhere in the tens of thousands of years here. So what I'd like to do is put a piece of flagging tape at the point where the drips would hit. And then we can capture some of the new calcite formation on the top of the piece of flagging tape. So if we come back in, say, 3 or 6 months' time, that'll help us to decide whether this is the one that we want to take to do the detailed work on back in the laboratory.
So we have this great opportunity to try and see what the climate has been like in terms of dry and wet for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years in the past.
That's right.
Very cool.
With our sample found and tagged, it's time to navigate our way out. The work done here will help our global understanding of how climate has been changing over time. Southeast Asia is currently going through unpredictable dry and wet seasons. Information about how those cycles behaved in the past will make the changing of the seasons much more predictable. The limestone karsts and caves of Laos have remained relatively untouched for centuries. For that reason, scientists are only now discovering that on top of these towering limestone formations are pristine ecosystems, little gems of biodiversity. But now, the karsts and the unspoiled world they support are under grave threat.
There's a spot where there's a scar on the side of the limestone, and that's where the local cement company has come here and is actually excavating and mining that limestone to use in their cement production. So at some point, this will end up being completely gone.
Limestone is the key ingredient in cement.
What a lot of people don't realize is that the production of cement is so widespread. It's the #2 resource used in the world just behind water, and it's actually a tremendous source of greenhouse gases. It takes, I've heard, between 7 and 8 tons of carbon dioxide gets pumped into the atmosphere for every ton of cement that is constructed.
Right now, there are 12 cement factories in Laos, but the country wants to increase production to meet the demands of change. In order to modernize, Laos plans to improve infrastructure, such as roads, dams, and housing. Depending on how those plans are carried out, those changes can either be devastating to the environment or have virtually no impact at all. The government will need to take a more active role in the protection and management of its farmland and forests, and resolve to harvest natural resources in a sustainable manner. If they do that, they stand a good chance of being one of the few nations to find a way of modernizing while reducing poverty and fighting climate change at the same time. Laos is well positioned to hit that very rare environmental home run.